Hi, I'm Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. I work as a senior Power Platform specialist for Vantage 365, and I'd like to welcome you to this Power Nerd presentation. Okay everyone, welcome to this Friday's learning session. Uh, First things first, by way of introduction, my name is Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. I have been a senior Power Platform developer for close to 4 years now. I'm currently working at Vantage 365. Today I'm going to be presenting this Friday learning session, again continuing our multi-part series that we've been doing so far on the PL-200. And today we're going to cover Power BI. We're going to provide a bit of an overview. We do, as always, have a bit of an agenda here in terms of developing that. So we have the introduction, which is obviously where we are now. Hi. But in terms of what we're going to learn about Power BI, we're going to learn about what Power BI is, what benefit it provides us, and where we might use it. We're going to look at the components that make up Power BI, and what those components look like and how to use them. And then we're going to look at how we distribute reports in Power BI. That includes things like setting refresh schedules on our data sources if it's not streaming data sets and live data, and then how we kind of make it as easy as possible for our users to find the reports and dashboards and things that we will create in Power BI. And then, as usual, we will have our discussion section at the end where we'll be able to ask questions, and kind of have that discussion as a community to find out what our experiences of Power BI and find some other helpful bits and answer those questions. But before we launch into all that, we do have, as usual, our rules of engagement. So very simple for these sessions. I have one rule. That is that there is no such thing as a stupid question. I firmly believe this rule. I have a 4-year-old daughter. She tests that assumption every single day. We have yet to find a stupid question, and we're all here to learn, okay? If you have a question, please ask it. I will do my best to answer. Um, yeah, that being said, let's launch right into it. Starting with the most important bit, what is Power BI? This is something we need to understand if we're going to be kind of undertaking the PL-200 course. So really, Power BI is about two things. It's about preparing data that we've collected somewhere else or that sits somewhere else. Um, what I mean by that is the ability to bring multiple data sets together, add columns, calculations, change the data, form it and shape it through the application of Power Query so that it's in a state where we can present it how we want to. And actually, that presentation is the second part of this, that data visualization. Once we've shaped that data through Power Query and brought it in, which we'll see a bit of today, we then want to be able to visualize that data into charts, tables that are able to be filtered with, interacted, and really allowing us to summarize that data in a meaningful way. And that's the benefit that Power BI provides to us from a platform space. It provides us that ability to gather our data together and present key insights, key performance indicators, and information in something that is meaningful. Because we can all dig through tables, we can all look through multiple rows, but until we start seeing a lot of time charts and tables and percentages, we don't really understand the kind of breadth of our data. So there is another bit to Power BI that's worthwhile noting in terms of what it is. When people talk about Power BI, a lot of the time they have a tendency to talk about the reports that they see in the online version. Well, actually, Power BI actually has three distinct parts to it in terms of as a platform, and these are three separate kind of bits of software. So you have Power BI Desktop. This is the development tool that enables you to create your reports, bring your data in, do your kind of data manipulation, and be able to visualize that data in the right way and actually build that report that you're looking to use. You then have Power BI Service, which is what a lot of people think of when we say Power BI, and that's the online portal in which we access our reports, our dashboards, our semantic models, and we're going to see all these reports, dashboards, and semantic models today. But that is essentially the Power BI service, sometimes also referred to as Power BI Online. That allows you to organize, manage, and distribute your reports and other Power BI items. And then we have the third part, which is the lesser known part of Power BI, but I find equally as important, which is Power BI Mobile. This is a mobile application that allows your end users to view reports in a mobile optimized format so they can view it on the go. And that is part of the kind of Power BI kind of package as a whole. But it's worthwhile noting that those specific mobile views, when we look at how we build reports, have to be configured themselves. But you may be asked about the Power BI mobile and what it allows your end users to do when it comes to the PL-200. But that is essentially what the how and what of what is Power BI. It provides us the benefit for data preparation and visualization, and it's built up of those three distinct parts being Power BI Desktop, which is the development tool, Power BI Service, which is the viewing, organization, management, and distribution tool, and the Power BI Mobile, which allows us to view those reports in that mobile format. So, when we looked at our agenda, obviously the next step on there was the components of Power BI. Now, this is where we start to move into actually viewing things. So, what are the components of Power BI? Well, Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service have a number of components that you are required to know about for the PL-200 exam. Before we get into how to build a report and I show you some of these components, we're going to talk through what each of them are. So the very first one, semantic models. Now this is a bit of a different piece here. So if I move over to the Power BI Online or Power BI Service and I navigate to Workspace, we can see some of the kind of component types that we've got. So right here we have the semantic model component. But what is a semantic model? Well, a semantic model is essentially a model that consists of all the connected data that is going to be used in a report. So if I actually click into this semantic model here, I've actually got a number of tables. So it's a collection of tables, and you can see in there I've got a few additional columns that I've created. So product category, product color. But the best way to think about this from a perspective of what we've learned previously is this is a collection of tables and data that gets used in our report. And that is the basics of a semantic model. We then have reports as a kind of component type. Now, what are reports? Well, they're relatively self-explanatory. You can see here, I've got a report component. They're essentially multiple pages in a report. So you can see here, I've got overview and stock checking. That's 2 pages that we've got there. It's a multi-page report that contains visualizations and cards and is interactable by your user to be able to look at the data that they have in front of them. So for instance, you can see here I have bottom 5 selling items. I can choose athletic sports shoes, and then he says, bear with. There we go. So you can see over here, product category, I've been able to select that. It's now filtered it down, and we can see that my visualizations are able to interact with each other and a few other bits. But the intent of the report is to take the data from that semantic model, put it into this report, place it into visualizations, and then be able to display that data in a meaningful way to our users. Now, you will have noticed that I used a term there called visualizations, which is actually the third item on there. Each of these components that you can see on here that have a box around them is a visualization. Now, these visualizations are built up using the data that's pulled through in the semantic model. Just like other Power Platform components that we've seen in terms of Power Apps and Power Automate, these are built in a low-code interface which is very much drag and drop. We'll get to see that in a little bit when we start to look at how we build a report, but it's worth it. Like I said, each one of these is a visualization. So this one up here that you can see is a card visualization. This one is a pie chart. This one is a bar chart. This one is a slicer. So each one of these is their own visualization. Now, dashboards. This was the fourth component on our list when we were looking at the slide deck. So dashboards are slightly different. Dashboards allow us to essentially produce what looks like a single page report. So they are slightly different, however. If I click onto this, you can see right now that this dashboard is empty. What dashboards are is essentially a way for us to pin visualizations from multiple reports in a single workspace onto a single page dashboard. So one of the key differences between reports and dashboards is that reports allow multiple pages, dashboards only allow a single page. Reports are built up of visualizations that you add in the desktop app. Again, we'll show that in a little bit. But dashboards work slightly differently. For us to be able to populate our dashboard, what we need to do is click into a report, and let's say I want to just show total revenue here. Now I can choose to keep current theme, use destination theme, a few other things. But what I'm doing here is I'm essentially hitting that little pin icon and pinning that to a dashboard. If I had multiple reports in this workspace, what I could do is I could go into each one, take the key information from that report, the headline pieces, and drop them into that dashboard. So I'm going to choose an existing dashboard that I've got here, which is my blank one. I'm going to hit pin. There we go. We can see we can create mobile layout there. Now, if I come across to my dashboard, you can see that that's pinned there. Now, obviously, as you saw in the report, I had a slicer over on the right here that was interactable. This is another key difference that's worthwhile noting between reports and dashboards. The tiles or the visualizations that we have present on the dashboard are not interactable. So I can't filter them, I can't move them, I can't do anything with them. However, if I click on the tile or the visualization that I've pinned here, what it's going to do is it's going to navigate me to the report in which it came from. So what benefit does that provide us? Well, with dashboards, we're allowed to essentially quickly highlight key visuals from multiple reports on that single page, like I said. The pinned visuals aren't interactive, which means that from that aspect, we don't have to worry about filtering or other items. But obviously, as we can see, it allows the users an easy and quick way to navigate to the report that key information has come from, should they want to dig deeper and should they want to kind of dig into what that report or that visualization is telling us. So as a bit of a summary in terms of the key components, we build our semantic models by bringing in data. Then from that semantic model, we build reports using visualizations, and then we pin these visualizations to create dashboards. So why is this all important to know? Well, the reason why these four key components are really important to know is there is a common flow when it comes to the production of Power BI reports. Now, that flow is relatively simple, close enough to 5 steps. The first step in that is always to connect to data, and I'm actually going to show this now. So when we connect to data, or we open up the Power BI desktop kind of app, you can see here that we have an empty page. So this is the desktop app that we are viewing now. Now that this is open, the very first thing we want to do is connect to our data. That's the first step in that common process. And you can see here that it gives us a nice, lovely little interaction that we can choose. We can choose to take from Excel, from SQL, from pasting data into a blank table, or we can use sample data. For now, I'm going to use sample data. And I'm going to hit load sample. Now, when you look at this, you would choose your data here. You choose your tables by selecting them. And then we then go into shaping our data. Now, I have the option to just load the data directly here. So this is the next step in the kind of common flows piece. So we transform the data with Power BI Desktop. So the first step is connect to it. Hey, we've done that. If I was doing it via Dataverse, I'd come across here, click Dataverse, and hey, there's my environments. I can go into them, I can take a look, and I can do what I need to do to be able to pull information from specific tables. Now, with that, once we've connected to our data by just choosing the data connection and, like I said, selecting the tables, we have the transform data option. That is the second step in the flow. But what does that transform data mean? Well, what it means is that, oh, that's not turned up. We end up with a secondary window. Now you'll have to bear with me while I add this in because it's being a bit of a pain. This one. So we end up with this window here. So this is a Power Query window. Now I mentioned about the fact that Power BI, one of the things it gives us the ability to do is shape our data, change it and transform it. This is done initially through Power BI. There is other Power Query, sorry. There are other kind of options in terms of later. We might look at DAX queries, but for now, this is how we're doing this. Now, what does that mean? Now, I've got a financials table here, and I can look through this, and I can go, oh, this is really interesting. Well, actually, I may not want the month number in my data, so I'm gonna remove that, and I may just want to rename this column here and say actually that one's now just going to be called month. So as you can see, what it's doing is it's basically adding in steps on the right hand side that allows us to transform our data and change it. I can choose to change the data type of a specific field. Um, But a lot of the time, what will happen is that Power BI will pick that up from the values that are in the field anyway. Once the data has been shaped, I can then hit close and apply. And what it's going to do is it's then going to load in my data here. So you can see over on this right hand side, we've got financials data and sheet 1, which are the two tables that we added in. So now that we've done step 2 in our kind of common flow, which is transform the data, we now need to create the visualization for this report. So how do we do that? Well, it's as simple as this. We have the visualizations over here on the right. You can select a visualization. You see here I've got pie chart, I've got stacked bar charts, and a load of other charts. You can also get more visuals by hitting here and hitting the get more visuals. What it's going to do is it's going to open up essentially kind of a list of visuals that have been community produced that you can pull from. Very useful to note. But for the purpose of today, I'm just going to click on a visual. You can see here, I've got my pie chart there. And as I said, this is a low-code interface. We don't have to worry too much about having to learn things like Python and kind of some of the data science languages out there. Instead, what we can do is we can come over to our data and we can go, well, actually, I want the gross sales to be part of the values, and I want it by, let's say, month as the legend. So right there, I've just produced a gross sales by month visualization. And it's as simple as that. We build our report using those visualizations. We obviously pull in our information by connecting to the data and then by transforming the data, removing the columns that we don't need, changing data types, renaming columns, doing all that using Power Query. Now, we've just seen obviously that third step in terms of creating visualizations of reports, Power BI Desktop. But now we want users to be able to see this. We want them to be able to kind of be able to access that report in a friendly manner, and we don't want to have to send them the Power BI desktop file that they would then open in Power BI desktop, because then they'll be able to edit it and it becomes a bit of a pain. So we're now actually going to move on to the fourth step in that kind of common flow, which is publishing the report to the Power BI service, that online service that we saw earlier. And it's really simple. We have this publish button up here in the top. So I hit publish. You do have to save your report first. Give it a name. And then you can see here that we've got a number of workspaces. But what are workspaces? Well, workspaces are essentially kind of like folders. They're a place for you to store your reports, your components, your semantic models. We actually saw one of those workspaces when we walked through what the different components are in terms of Power BI when we looked at semantic models and reports and dashboards. So we have to choose a workspace when you publish the report. Uh, Everybody by default has access to the My Workspace workspace. However, this workspace specifically is ideal only for testing. This is because it is limited. You are unable to set a scheduled refresh in the My Workspace area, and the sharing capabilities of that workspace are limited. So if you are publishing a report that you want others to use and you want to ensure is up to date, ensure that you have a workspace to publish it to that isn't the My Workspace area so that you can publish it there. For now, I'm going to publish this to the Power BI how-to workspace that I have set up earlier. What we're going to see is we're going to see publishing test report.pbix to Power BI, and once that completes, we can see success. Great. Now, what does that mean? Well, we've actually just published that. That's great. But from a perspective of actually viewing it, what we want to see is it appear in the workspace. So we're in the Power BI service area now in terms of online. Now I published it as Power BI how to. If I click into here, there's my test report. But you can also see a semantic model component has been added. As I said, every report is backed by a semantic model. That's the data that sits within it. Now, if I click on test report here as the semantic model, you can see that financials and sheet 1 are in there. That's what defines my data model. You can share a semantic model in terms of setting their permissions to work with it, and a few other bits in here. We'll look at that in a little bit. But for now, if I click on test report, there's my visualization. You can see on here, filters on this visual, because I've selected this visual. I can now, as an end user, interact with this. I can change it. I can then set this to go, let's go less than that number. None of them are less than that number, so therefore it's cleared out. But that's how we then publish our reports into that workspace and get them available to people to view from that area. But now we need to look at how we then distribute and manage those reports in Power BI service. So how do we do that? Now that we've created the report, like I said, we want to be able to share it to the end users and make sure it's always up to date. Well, the first thing we want to do is make sure it's always up to date because we don't want to be sharing information with users that is out of date. So we need to set a refresh schedule. The way to do this is if we go to the Power BI How-To workspace and we look at the semantic model here, you can see that there's a handy little icon called Schedule Refresh. We click on that and it takes us into the settings. Under the refresh option, of course, it's grayed out for the moment, but you would be able to configure a refresh schedule in here by turning this to on. I have a feeling this is because I have used sample data. But if I look at this one here as a semantic model, he says schedule refresh. There we are. It's not working any. But yes, in terms of, there we go, configure refresh schedule. You turn that on. You can set that to daily, weekly, and then when you set it to daily, you can choose times. It's worthwhile noting that the amount of times you can refresh a semantic model in a day is dependent on licensing. The only time you may not be required to configure a scheduled refresh is if you are using a live streaming data set. These are enabled for Dataverse, so you wouldn't have to configure a refresh schedule on that. But in terms of obviously setting that refresh schedule, come into the settings of the semantic model, choose the refresh option, turn this switch to on, set the refresh frequency to whichever refresh frequency you need, whether it's daily or weekly. And if you need it more than one time a day, make sure you add your additional times in there as well. You can also configure refresh failure notifications to go to specific people, and then make sure you hit apply, and there we go. So we've now looked at obviously how we set a refresh schedule. We then need to look at how we distribute the content. Well, the first thing you need to do is look at the permissions for your workspace. If users don't have permissions to the workspace, they're not going to be able to see the reports that you share with them. So you see here, I've got manage access. So we come to the workspace, we hit manage access, and I'm going to add an additional individual by hitting add people or groups, type in their name, and you can then set their permission level. Viewer access will only give them access to view the items in the workspace. Contributor access will give them the ability to edit things like dashboards in there. Member access will give them the ability to publish, and admin will give them the ability to remove items as well. So for now, I'm just going to choose viewer and hit add. And there we go. Now that individual's got access to the workspace. We've now distributed the reports to them. Brilliant. But what happens if you have a workspace that is absolutely filled with all sorts of reports? Let's say you're working at a company where everybody publishes their reports to one single workspace. It's difficult to get through things. It's difficult to find things as an end user. Well, actually, there's a way to make that easier. There's a button up here next to Manage Access called Create App. And what this does is it allows us to generate an app for our users that makes it easier for them to navigate around that workspace rather than having to search through the list. We do have to give it an app name and a description. We choose an app logo and we give an app theme color. I'm going to choose that nice little red. You can provide contact information so that if people want to contact the owner of the app, they can do or ask questions. We then have a little switch down here that's worthwhile noting called access to hidden content. Now, if you turn this on, and this will make sense in a minute, what it says it does is it gives people access to the content that is not in the app or it's hidden from the navigation. That makes sense when we move on to the next page, which is add content. Now, right here, I'm going to hit add content. Let's say I had 50 reports in here. Well, actually, we only wanted to give them access to 3. We just click on those 3 and then hit add. Once we've done that, we go across to add audience and we say, hey, I want the entire organization to be able to see this, or I only want specific users. Now I'm going to put in an additional user, and then I'm going to hit publish app. We do get a warning about publishing it to a large distribution, such as if you'd selected an entire security group. And then you can give them a link to access that app directly rather than them having to go to the Power BI service themselves, find the workspace, and then find the report that they're after. They can come into this app, find what they need, and have it prepped and ready. But we have now looked at how we distribute our reports in Power BI, how we make it easier for our users to find them, and how we configure a refresh schedule. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and got to learn something new, and I'll see you in the next one.